Mind, Body, Spirit, Part 5. Where do emotions come from? Welcome to this video where we're going to be diving into what makes you you. And really, this episode is going to be blowing things apart on a whole new level. So far, we've been looking at all the different aspects of who we are. So spirit, unconscious mind or body, and conscious mind. In this episode, we're going to be unpacking how emotions form, where they come from, whether it be hatred, whether it be fear, whether it be anger, whether it be jealousy, all these negative emotions that human beings have struggled with since the beginning of time. We're going to be understanding what causes these to arise, because the reality is most people, and for much of our lives, we spend our time reacting to external circumstances. And whether it be to do with money or relationships, people who trigger us, our sense of physical well-being, our environment, we're continually reacting to what's out there. But when we get into this, and when we start to understand the source of our emotions, we're really taking the power back into ourselves. We're really getting centered again and living from our center. And this simple shift of moving from an external orientation to an internal orientation is literally the most powerful change that any human being can make. When life starts to flow out of you instead of trying to get life from out there, it just changes the whole game. This one perspective shift will revolutionize any area of your life. So this is going to be a really powerful episode, which I always say because it's true. This one in particular, we're going deep. So get ready for this. And to begin with, I just want you to imagine right now something in your life that's challenging you. Something in your life that, you've been at it maybe for a while, you've been trying to make improvements, or you've been trying to get a breakthrough, or you've just been trying to enjoy this aspect of your life, whether it be in your relationships, your career, maybe it's a new hobby, new business you want to start, a new instrument you want to learn to play. Whatever it may be, the only thing that's holding you back from completely owning that and winning at that and excelling at that is emotion. It's deeper than limiting belief. It's deeper than just something like, maybe we tell ourselves stories like, I'm just not ready yet, or I don't have a high enough opinion of myself, low self-esteem. Any of these different issues, it all comes back to emotion. So let's jump into this. So like we've already seen in this series so far, we're made up of these three parts, right? Right in the center, a quick refresher, spirit. Spirit, the infinite source of energy. Abundant, pure, filled with power, completely happy, whole, and complete. If we imagine back to the beginning of time, let's say, here was spirit, formless, perfect, complete, unconditionally loving. And then spirit decides, I'm going to have an experience and I'm going to create a separate self. And by doing this, by individualizing from everything into one particular thing, this is going to allow me to have an experience of reality. This is going to allow me to explore who I am. And so what does spirit do? It takes on form. And this little layer here, this represents the ego. So spirit condenses itself, individualizes itself into a separate form. Now, in our case, where we live in this physical world, we're biological in nature. Our bodies are biological. We've evolved throughout time into these biological organisms. And being biological, we have needs. We need to eat, we need to have rest, we need to have shelter, safety, maybe a community for a higher life form. We might need to reproduce. So all of these different things are included in the ego. The ego has survival programs, because without this, spirit couldn't individualize, couldn't get around, couldn't navigate the physical world. So the ego is an important and essential part of spirit, individualizing and having this experience. Next, we've got the unconscious mind. Remember, we've looked at the unconscious mind. This is the storehouse of all of our emotions, all of our memories, all of our experiences. So the ego, this almost like a starter pack, like if you go and get a new phone, you need a SIM card to put in that phone. The SIM card contains all the programs for being able to make and receive calls, send text messages. That's what the ego basically is. It's like this machine almost that allows spirit to have this experience in the physical world. So the ego starts to write experiences into the unconscious mind based on what's coming in from the external environment. The ego, which already has these programs, these basic survival programs, is now learning from its world and storing these memories in the unconscious mind. This is what you've done as you've grown from a small child into who you are today. All of this sense of who you are is stored in this unconscious mind. So we've already looked at that. And then, of course, on the outermost layer, we have the conscious mind. And this is the part of you which is having this experience right now, which is aware that you're here, that you're sitting here, that you're witnessing, that you're hearing sound, that you're seeing, that you're feeling. It's this you that's right here now. And this conscious mind refers back to the unconscious mind to get its sense of who it is, right? This is like the moment by moment. This is like the biography, the story of who you are. So how does emotion fit into all of this? Well, what happens is emotion is really the result of sensations which we resist. Okay, this is the foundational, this is the fundamental key of where it all begins. And if you understand this, you're actually going to be further ahead than most mental health professionals, okay? Because the understanding that most people have, at least in our Western world, is that emotions are purely biological, pure programs. They're purely chemical in their basis. But we're going to go deeper here and you're going to really understand what's going on. So here's spirit again. Now spirit has the ego, and the ego is programmed with survival programs. I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to do all these different things. Now, what happens is the ego is having these experiences in the external world, right? There's things happening. Maybe this is like a simple single-celled organism. Or maybe this is you as a baby. You can look at it however way you want. But the ego's having these experiences, and what happens is stimulus is coming in from the external environment. Stimulus, right? This could be a sound. This could be a feeling. This could be a temperature shift. This could be, maybe it's a little organism that wants to eat this one. And it's a visual stimulus. Whatever it may be. So you've got auditory, kinesthetic, visual, olfactory, and gustatory. Our 5 senses. Olfactory, smell, gustatory, taste. So this basic organism receives stimulus, okay? Now, based on this ego's programming, it's got this biological built-in programming. It is going to respond to this stimulus. So the stimulus comes in, the ego responds to it on the most basic level. The most basic level of response is sensation, okay? So stimulus comes in, triggers a sensation from the ego, right? So now we're getting these little sensations coming. The ego's like, oh, I can feel something. I can hear something. Is it a threat? Is it a friend? Is it someone I can have sex with? Is it something I can eat? All these different possibilities. But because of the ego's programming, it's going to respond in a certain way and it's going to feel a certain sensation, okay? So think about when you hear something, the sound of someone's voice who triggers you, for example, or you see something that brings back a memory. Instantly, the first thing that happens when this stimulus hits your awareness is there's a sensation released. Now we're going to spend a bit of time on this because sensation is really the foundation of emotion. And by getting deep into sensation, we're actually able to dissolve any emotion, whether it be depression, anxiety, fear, whatever it may be. By understanding and learning how to get in touch with this, we're going to be able to dissolve any kind of negative emotion very, very quickly. And we're using the letting go method to do this. I'm going to unpack how to do that. But before we get to that, number 3 is response to the sensation. Okay? So now we're feeling a sensation. Maybe it's a vibration. Maybe it's a buzzing feeling. So a sensation is the most basic form of feeling in the body. Okay? Examples could be tingling. It could be contracting, tension. It could be shaking. It could be warmth. We all of a sudden feel some warmth in our body. It could be, let's say, expansion. It could be cold. It could be prickly. Now, what do you notice about all of these words? Do you notice that there's no emotional connection to these words? They're simple descriptions of a physical feeling. So a sensation isn't sadness. A sensation isn't anger. A sensation isn't rage or shame. These aren't sensations. Notice that. A sensation is simply the physical response on the most basic level with no emotional involvement yet. We haven't got there. That's where we are, sensations. So our body's feeling this sensation. Then we're going to respond. The ego is then going to respond. And the way it's going to respond is according to its programs, the way it's programmed to respond. Because to live in a biological suit, in a biosuit, in an ego, in an individualized self, we need these pre-programs to be able to navigate around and to be able to survive in the physical world. So when this sensation comes out, it's triggered from the ego, it's feeling, maybe it sees this monster looking thing over here. Immediately, a sensation of contraction is released. So this is where fight or flight's getting activated, right? So it's feeling this sensation of contraction. That's step 1. Step 2, after the sensation, step 3 is response. So the ego's feeling this contraction, then what is it going to do? what it's going to do next is very interesting, and this is where emotion kicks in, right? The next thing that the ego is going to do is it's going to either cling or it's going to resist. So here comes the stimulus. Here's the ego over here. Sensation comes in. Stimulus comes in. A sensation is released, let's say contraction in its body. 3, it's going to either cling to that sensation if it's programmed to believe that it's good, that it's positive, that it's going to allow the ego to survive or grow, or it's going to resist that sensation. Okay, so all of a sudden, if the ego goes, okay, I like this sensation of contraction, well, it's going to cling. But in most cases, what is contraction? It's a form of shrinking. It's a form of sinking into oneself. It's a form of really protection. So it's a protection response. So the ego is now going to associate this sensation of contracting with a threat, and it's going to resist that sensation. So now, every time the ego feels this feeling of contraction, whether it be from this particular environmental threat, like it's labeling it a threat, every time it feels this contraction, it's now linking this to a feeling of threat or resistance, right? And now this whole thing becomes linked into one. Here's your emotion. That's an emotion, right? And we might call this emotion fear. We might call that fear with our logical minds. We might look at that feeling of contracting and also the feeling of resistance released by the ego in response to that contracting, because it's labeled it, because it's pre-programmed to respond to threats and also to move towards positive, beneficial, life-giving experiences. Every living organism does this on the most basic level. There's this response of either towards or away from. Pleasure, pain. This is the dance that the ego is playing, right? And so here is our first emotion. We've got an emotion called fear. So what happens next? What happens next? Because this is something that happened with you at a very young age. This is what happens to all human beings, right? Remember, the two primary drivers of every organism is survive and expand. We can't expand until we have first survived. So this is our primary starting point. This is our sim starter pack that we get when we're small babies. Our first priority is to survive. Our first priority is to connect with our caregivers, our tribe, is to find our sense of self, our sense of place. So now this little organism which is growing has just been programmed with its first emotion. And every time this organism now feels that contraction feeling, maybe it's a sense of contraction, a shrinking in the gut, maybe it's butterflies, maybe it's a tingling, maybe it's a elevated heart rate. You know, it can feel that elevated heart rate inside of itself. These are all sensations. The butterflies in the stomach, the tension, maybe the shaking, maybe the elevated heart rate. They're all sensations that have now been labeled. So these are the sensations. They've now been labeled with resistance, and they all have become one unit. Now, this is essential. This is actually a really key part of being able to survive, being able to grow and develop. The problem happens when we get to a point where we no longer need to be afraid of certain stimulus because we've outgrown it. Maybe we don't need to be afraid of being abandoned by our parents anymore because we're fully grown adults, as an example. But what happens is we've grown up now, and this emotion has become a part of our unconscious mind. This emotion is lodged in our psyche, right? And this is where it gets really, really crazy, because not only is this emotion, this isn't a one-time thing. This isn't just it's happened and now it's history. This is starting to grow now because the ego has linked this with survival, and it's now linked this as something that it needs to survive. And so while the conscious mind, remember on the outskirts here, the conscious mind is out here having its experience, it's totally forgotten about this. It's totally forgotten about it. It's gone unconscious. And now this has become a program that is running the whole thing. And every single bit of stimulus that in any way relates to that first experience, when that first emotion of fear was formed, any bit of stimulus that's in any way related is now added to that. It's now added to this entity, this energy field of fear, right? Every association. So now we're older, we've got a boss, we've got a job, for example. The boss is angry. We hear the angry tone of his voice or her voice or its voice coming in, and we can associate that now with this. So the boss's voice gets linked in as one of the stimulus that triggers this feeling, that triggers these sensations. Remember? Stimulus, number one. Sensation, number two. And then response, number three, which is creating the emotion. Okay? So now the boss is doing this. A problem we're having in our relationship, maybe it's our partner is triggering us in a certain way. Stimulus of their voice. Maybe they're pestering us about something we haven't done. We haven't taken the bins out, whatever it may be. It's all feeding into this same emotion, right? Because anything that's in any way reminding us of that original experience which we resist is going to get added to the data bank. This is like a data bank. And what we need to understand here is that feelings are arranged according to tones. So all feelings have a certain, or all emotions have a certain tone to them. And it's very different to, it's not the same as our mental associations, where you think of ice cream and then you think of an ice cream truck, that association we make on a mental level. This also happens on a feeling level. So anything that remotely feels like that first experience, that emotion of fear, is now getting added to it. So over time, we're learning to avoid more and more things, to resist or be afraid of more and more things, because the ego is linking this fear emotion to our survival. The ego unconsciously thinks that by adding to this database, we can hedge our bets. We're better protected against the environment, against the world, against threats. So this is growing now. This isn't the only emotion though, remember. We've got so many different emotions. We've got this full spectrum of emotions. Fear is perhaps the densest and lowest of the emotions. It's one of the most primary that really encompasses all of the other negative emotions. But we've also got anger. We've also got jealousy. we've got shame, we've got guilt. Notice here that I'm talking about emotions in a negative sense. I'm not really talking about positive emotions. And the reason for that is because positivity is actually our natural state. This might sound crazy, but remember this spirit? The spirit in the core of who we are is nothing but pure love. It's nothing but pure light. It's nothing but radiant positivity and peace, because that is the underlying state of the universe. That's what all of this is made out of. It's only when this spirit wants to have a physical experience that it has to individualize, and now that it's individualized, it has to protect itself from other. Before, there was no other. There was just self. Now, there's self and there's other. So these negative emotions, as part of the evolutionary process, have to be formed until the organism can reach a point where it can let go of those negative emotions. It doesn't have to be run by them anymore. So this by itself would be pretty amazing just by itself, right? The fact that we can do this as part of our survival strategy as not just human beings, but any living organism is extraordinary. It's amazing. But it gets more complicated. It gets more problematic when we evolve as humans, the thinking mind. This is where all our problems really begin, right? So animals can kind of get by on all this. They can be run by all of this quite happily. They can get through their life, do everything they need to do, reproduce, eat, whatever it may be. And they can have all of these emotions going on, and they can survive pretty happily with that. Humans are quite different. Human beings have the ability to think and to reflect on the way they feel. And this is where suffering comes in. So, unconscious mind, spirit at the center, ego, unconscious mind, conscious mind. Human beings have a conscious mind. And all of a sudden, we're able to reflect on these emotions. We're able to look at them and go, hang on a sec, why do I feel like this? This is very uncomfortable. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to feel afraid anymore, or I don't want to go through my life feeling angry all the time. The problem is, again, we've got our emotions in here. The thinking mind, this is a huge, huge point. The thinking mind is an extension of the emotions. So what that means is all of these emotions in here that have been created from our different experiences and our resistance to them, our resistance to the stimuli based on the ego's belief that we need to resist certain things or cling to them in order to survive. We might cling to and experience a beautiful experience with a person. We might cling to the trash food that feels so good in the moment. We might cling to any kind of positive experience that gives the ego a little boosted sense of survival. Like, oh yeah, we're doing it. We're surviving. We're expanding. The ego naturally clings or resists. Now, these programs, otherwise known as emotions, are telling us resist this or cling to this, right? Resist these kinds of people, these kinds of places, which trigger this feeling of fear or anger or shame or guilt or whatever it may be, and cling to the other ones which allow us to feel like we're safe or we're secure or the threat is gone or we're important or we're powerful. these kind of things, the ego is starting to cling to them. So these programs on an emotional level are running the conscious mind. And this is just crazy, right? Because what is actually going on here is our thoughts are like these emotions sprouting into our conscious experience. So whenever there's an experience resisted, that's not the end of the story. So remember, back here where we're feeling fear or guilt or shame or whatever it is, we're resisting them because we don't want to feel it, because the ego interprets it as a threat. But that energy's got to go somewhere, right? All energy, if it's not allowed to flow, is going to start building up. So spirit is expanding. This energy source inside of all of us wants to expand, wants to grow as part of its one of its two primary goals, survival and expansion. So there's a continual flow of energy emanating out of our center, but it's getting stuck with these emotions. These are like filters now that filter our view of reality. Everything we can see out there is actually a projection of what's going on in here. That's a huge, huge point. And so this energy is building up, this fear inside of us on a very deep unconscious level. Our spirit wants to release it, wants to be free from it, wants to resolve this developmental conflict. That's what fear is. It's a developmental conflict of, should I shrink back or should I go forward? Should I shrink back and protect myself? Or should I take the risk and grow? Because I can't grow without taking risks. So the energy is building up, but it's got no place to go because these emotions are blocking the flow. Kind of like the spiral we drew as another way of explaining it, where we've got all these blocks, right? The blocks are emotions. This is really just an extension of that episode, looking deeper at what emotions are. These blocks of spirit are emotions. They're conflicts. So this energy is starting to overflow now, and it's bleeding out. It's pushing its way out of our unconscious mind into our conscious mind, which is the thinker, the one who ruminates, the one who reflects, the one who imagines, the one who's trying to solve problems, is now being overwhelmed with our repressed emotions that we haven't allowed this energy to flow. So all of a sudden, we're going, oh, I'm such an idiot. Oh, this world isn't safe. Oh, what's the worst that could happen? I need to make a plan for the worst that can happen because it's probably going to happen. It always happens to me. People just can't be trusted, or I just can't be trusted, or I'm just not good enough. I'm not good enough. All of these stories, all these beliefs, right? They're flowing out of our stuck emotions. So unworthiness, as an example, a very common experience for a lot of people. If we trace unworthiness down to the deepest level, so unworthy feeling, this is on the conscious mind level. If we go down deeper, we'll find that there's a feeling or an emotion, and maybe we can call that emotion apathy or guilt. Maybe we feel guilt deep down, or maybe we feel shame, or maybe we just feel afraid of people, right? That's the emotional level. If we go down deeper, what we've actually got is body sensations. Remember, sensations. Maybe we've got a feeling every time we have to speak in public, as an example, which is perhaps something that triggers this unworthiness. We're getting a feeling inside. We're getting butterflies in the tummy. We're getting cold. Our skin's getting cold. We might start shaking. We might need to suddenly just go and take a piss. We might feel like vomiting. All these different things. These are sensations, right? They're just sensations. They're just physical feelings that happen with no emotional content related until we add it. So if we break it all down, all these complex feelings and thoughts and beliefs that we have on this conscious level are actually sensations. This is what gives us the power to change it. So what does this look like? If we were to map this out, what that actually looks like, we've got a scale, right? We've got a scale of experience. And on this scale, we've got these 3 levels: conscious mind, unconscious mind, and down here we've really got our body, the most foundational physical part of who we are. And then if we want to go even deeper, we've got spirit. But we're just going to look on this scale at these main 3 bits. So conscious mind is the domain of thought. Unconscious mind is the domain of emotions, which we've been looking at. And then body is the domain of sensation. So we've got these 3 different levels, and these different levels have different levels of power. This is where it gets intense, right? Now, most people, when they're trying to deal with negativity, are dealing with it on the level of thought. If there's a problem, if there's some kind of block in their life, if there's depression or there's anxiety or there's whatever it may be, problems in your relationships, problems in growing your business, self-sabotage, problems in your creative expression, expressing yourself, any of these problems, we start by ruminating over these problems in our mind. Our conscious mind is like, oh, this sucks. This has to change. This person, they're an idiot. Or I'm an idiot. I should never have spoken to them. Whatever it is. I'm fat. I'm too thin. I'm not muscular enough. I don't have enough energy. And round these thoughts are going, right? What do we try and do in the West? What's our first port of call in the modern day? This didn't happen 200 years ago. This is the modern Western approach to dealing with this discomfort, which is happening on our thought level. We think it's our negative thoughts, right? So we jump on YouTube, we start watching some positive thinking clips. Maybe we read some books about how to change our thoughts. And maybe we go and see a psychologist, as an example. And we tell them about these negative thoughts we're having. Maybe we go and get some medication. Maybe we just start focusing on positive things. Now, this is okay. This is all fine. However, it's not very effective. It might be the starting point to get the ball rolling. If we really want to go down into what's creating this, it might be a great starting point. However, it's not going to address the problem. This is one of my biggest frustrations, because I was in this stage for years. I struggled to change my thoughts. I thought the problem was up here. And in reality, the driving force of it was much deeper. So if we're continuing on this journey, we're realizing this isn't cutting it. Masking my symptoms with medication is not cutting it. Or escaping by distracting myself is not cutting it. I need to go deeper. I need to find out on the emotional level, what is creating this problem? Why is it that I feel unworthy or afraid all the time, or afraid of this particular thing? I just feel so blocked when it comes to relationships. I keep attracting the same kind of person. What's actually going on? So we might delve deeper into something like hypnosis, or NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Or we might start doing meditation. This is moving in a really good direction here. And all of this is giving us access into deeper levels of the unconscious mind, right? All of this stuff, we're very much on the top level. This stuff, we're moving deeper into the unconscious. We're getting a lot warmer. We're getting a lot closer to unpacking and dissolving the emotional driver of the problem. We might continue on this path of self-exploration and really looking to heal ourselves, and we might go down the path of body work, because now our body's part of this, right? Any emotion that's resisted over time is going to do two things. First, it's going to overflow into our thinking mind, into our conscious experience. Secondly, if this isn't dealt with, if a blocked emotion isn't dealt with, it's going to start manifesting in our body. Tiredness, fatigue, irritability, muscle pain, back pain, all of this is now flowing out from this deeper level, and it's affecting our physical body, because the body's going, you're not paying attention to me. You're not paying attention to these sensations you've been resisting now for a long time, for years. So now I'm going to give you a little alert message. Maybe that'll get your attention. And if left untreated, this is what develops into physical disease. This is the disease process happening, right? This is where it comes from. So we might start looking into body work. We might start taking care of our nutrition. We might start seeing a massage therapist. We might start exercising more. And this is all really good. And by the way, a lot of psychologists, I'm not completely shitting on psychology, because it's definitely amazing. It's just limited. But a lot of psychologists will recommend stuff like this. They'll recommend get to bed on time, have a routine, be around positive people, exercise, take care of your eating, get all that stuff in shape, and you're going to start feeling better. And that's definitely the case. So all of this physical stuff is now assisting us with getting right down to the core. The only problem is, if we're not dealing on the root level, which I'm going to suggest the most powerful way you can do this, right? I forgot to put in things like plant medicine. It's another thing that a lot of people try. Spirituality, having a spiritual practice, it's all part of this. The only problem with all of this is that if it's not bringing us into direct contact with the original sensations that we've been resisting this whole time, it's not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem? Letting go. I've been talking about this so much, and now we're going to actually dive into what this looks like. So, as we've seen, all of this stuff is really powerful. It all has its place. This scale of different approaches to treating the core problem, which is our blocked emotions, it's all going to play a little bit of a part. But until we get into surrender, into letting go, it's not going to be a permanent shift. We're going to be stuck in this place of constantly trying to do all these different things on this more superficial level to deal with the real problem, which is, remember, back down here, we've got the ego, unconscious mind, conscious mind. The ego is programmed to respond to certain stimulus with certain sensations which are released, and then the ego says, hey, we need to resist this. This can't happen. This sensation, we need to avoid it. We need to remember all of this and store that energy so it doesn't happen again. So really, the problem is the ego's resistance or clinging. One of those two things. It's either resisting these sensations or it's clinging to them. It's trying to keep them. And both of these things are creating its suffering. So letting go. What is letting go at the most basic level? What is letting go really all about? This is getting exciting. I'm getting excited by this. So letting go is all about one thing. It's about surrender. What does that look like? when this stimulus comes in, right, now as a mature, conscious mind, we can observe what's going on. We don't have to go into the automatic response of resisting the stimulus, resisting the boss, resisting our angry partner, resisting feeling like we don't have enough money or feeling like there's something wrong with the world, resisting, contracting, pulling away. When the stimulus comes in, whatever that stimulus is that we've been trained to fight or fly from or to cling to, what we can do in order to surrender it is observe the stimulus come in, observe our reaction, observe the sensations that are released in our body, because there's always a sensation. Let's say you hear a car crash on the street out the front of your house. Immediately there's a sensation released. Maybe it's elevated heart rate, maybe it's shaking, maybe it's just blood's pumping way faster. The sensation's released, right? Immediately the ego says, this sensation has to go away. It's a threat to my survival. I need to do something. I need to go and find out what's going on out there, make sure I'm safe, make sure I stay away from it, make sure The ego's already running. It's releasing this resistance, right? This resistance is flowing out. In order to surrender, all we have to do is allow the ego to release all of its resistance. Because the ego just does that automatically. You don't have to make it do that. It just happens. Whenever the stimulus is right, based on its learned patterns of behavior, based on your history, what's happened throughout your childhood, what's happened throughout your whole life, based on what's programmed into your ego as part of your biological inheritance from your ancestors and every living thing that's led up in the evolutionary chain to who you are now, it's all encoded into this ego. And it's going to release that resistance when the stimulus happens. You're going to feel that resistance to maybe it's doing that extra study, doing that extra bit of work that you need to do to get it over the line. You're going to feel that resistance come out and get released by your ego. All you have to do is sit and on this conscious mind level, observe it. Observe the resistance coming out, right? Observe it. And what is observation? It's just noticing it. It's just paying attention to what's going on. The split second when someone cuts you off in traffic and immediately the anger comes up, the resistance comes up, observe. Simply observe and relax. Relax. Because what is resistance? It's tension. It's physical tension. It's contracting around this stimulus that we don't want to feel, the way our body's responding. It's like, oh no, I don't want to feel like this. We shrink around it and we contract it, and that's what locks it in. That's what forms all of this into an emotion. It condenses that experience and locks it into our body, locks it into our unconscious mind. All we have to do is observe and relax. By relaxing, what's going to happen is this stimulus or this resistance that our ego is putting out, stimulus, triggering resistance, tension, contracting. It's all getting released, right? The ego's freaking out because of this stimulus. If we simply relax and observe, this is going to run out. The reason is because there's a limited amount of resistance. Everything in nature has an adaptive ability. Everything that is biological, every form of life has adaptation built into it. You can adapt to any situation you put yourself in, right? The ego is going to adapt when it realizes that you are no longer fighting it. You're not contracting anymore. So resistance is going to run out, kind of like a balloon. This is like what your ego is. It's only got a certain amount of resistance inside of it until it lets it all out and realizes, hey, this stimulus isn't killing me right now. I'm actually okay. And then the ego adapts. It grows. And this is a huge level up. This represents you releasing that negative emotion. Because every negative emotion is really just a combination of resistance and sensation in your physical body. Boom. There it is, summarized. So what does this actually look like? How does this change things? Well, once you've faced your fear, for example, one of the most foundational negative emotions built into the ego, once you've faced enough fear, it's going to run out. It's going to completely run out, right? Once you've faced enough anger or whatever it is, and you're relaxing and you're observing it, it's going to run out. And automatically what's going to happen is your unconscious mind, because spirit is always looking to expand, your unconscious mind is going to bring situations into your life, whether you like it or not, that trigger fear, that trigger anger, so that you can learn to adapt and evolve through it. This is the story of life. This is what spirit's doing. So the more you can put yourself little by little into situations that stimulate this fear, stop running and hiding from it, and actually face it, the more this process is going to get triggered, the resistance is going to start coming up, and by simply being there with it and allowing it to happen, it's going to run out. All these negative emotions can be dissolved, every single one of them. What's actually happening here is it's not like you're making the emotion go away. You're relaxing around the sensations that are triggered by the stimulus. And you're learning a new behavior. You're learning a new way of being, so that the person who has a million different things to be afraid of, as they start surrendering all of this fear, all of those things they're afraid of are just going to suddenly be fine. It's not a threat anymore, because the ego realizes, hey, I don't have to react in fight or flight mode. I can actually just relax and observe what's going on, and I'm still alive. That's it. That's the process. It's so simple. So what does this actually look like? What are some examples of how you can do this? I want to keep things really simple. I want to keep things really achievable for you, because as you start on this letting go journey, things are going to accelerate quickly. Things are going to start happening, and you're going to start experiencing new states of freedom that you've never known, perhaps. So a really simple place to start is by learning to just be okay with sensations that get released from your ego when certain events happen, right? These sensations are going to get triggered no matter what. The resistance is going to get triggered, and all you have to do is sit there and watch it. So a really good place to start might be start having cold showers. Why is that? Having a cold shower is going to bring up the sensation from your ego of, this is not okay. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Get me out of this cold shower right now. Have you ever felt that? It's going to start feeling these resistance feelings. And by just being there, breathing through it, relaxing your body, relaxing your mind, exposing yourself to this trigger of resistance, it's going to start to run out. What's another example? Anything really that you can do to put yourself into a state of resistance being triggered. Exercise. Pushing yourself to exercise in ways that really make you feel emotions you don't want to feel. Getting up early. Changing your diet. Not eating junk food. These are really, really simple baseline examples. But anything you can do to trigger this response of the ego, and then you can just be in that safe environment where you can just sit back and relax and observe what's happening. This is all acclimatizing you. This is all getting you used to feeling your resistance and not contracting around it, not pulling in and becoming tense and forming new negative emotions. This is all about getting you used to simply relaxing and observing your ego's response to the world. Confrontation is another example. Having those discussions that you need to have that you've been putting off. This is going to trigger resistance. One of the primary fears of human beings is abandonment, breaking rapport in relationships, because we're social creatures, and on some level we've got this belief that if I create an enemy or I break rapport with someone, I'm going to die. That's the ego's programming. Confrontation is a great one. Having those discussions you need to have. Spending money. If you're someone who you get triggered by spending large amounts of money, and there's no real logical reason for you not to make that important purchase that you need to make, but you just feel safer by not spending the money, just holding on to it. Spend the money. It's going to release the resistance. You're going to relax and breathe through it, and you're going to be okay, right? Not spending money, if you're an overspender, if you're a shopaholic, by deliberately putting yourself in a situation where you're not going out and blowing $300 on new makeup, cosmetics, or hair, or whatever it may be, or protein powder, or anything that you overspend money on, you don't need to. Get used to not spending your money. This is equally going to release the resistance, and just get used to that feeling. Start to acclimatize. This is all about immersing yourself in triggering situations that release the negative emotions, because that's going to allow you to then start to free them up. Saying no. Saying no is a huge one. A lot of us are caught in that cycle of just being people pleasers, of always looking to please the other person. Learn to say no. Learn to put yourself first, and if someone asks you to do something outside of your values, just simply say no. That's going to bring up these emotions. If you're one of those people that needs to do that, if this applies to you, that's going to be a really good one for you. Being single is another one. A lot of us as egos have built up emotional dependencies, codependencies on relationships. Maybe we just bounce from relationship to relationship, or we stay far too long in ones we shouldn't be in. Being single is another example, just stepping it up a notch of something you can do to begin to trigger yourself, because life is going to trigger you, or you can intentionally trigger yourself to release these old, stuck, negative emotions. It's all part of this process of expansion. Challenging your most deeply held beliefs. That's another big one. We'll go into some of this in more detail in future episodes, but I hope that gives you a really good understanding of where this is coming from, what creates negative emotions, and how you can begin to really deal with these on the deepest possible level. Surrender is the process that I've just told you about. Letting go is this process we've just covered. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that's lighting up some light bulbs for you. Go back and watch it again if you need to understand some of those concepts. But start applying this stuff, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.